Well, I think if they're really bright, my advice to them would be to get out of the country at this stage. I would suggest they definitely consider emigrating. I think you've seen in the south of Ireland where there's something like 100,000 people have already decided they're going to emigrate. And I would say for the really bright ones, it's definitely an option. It's an option I took in '69 myself when the Troubles were beginning, and I decided, right, this is not the place to be, and I emigrated to South Africa. In 1976, South Africa was looking a little bit dodgy, and I decided to go to the States at that time. So I've emigrated twice. I know what it's like, and I would suggest it's just the most wonderful experience a person can have, but they have to be almost greedy, they have to be confident, they have to be assertive, but it can be done. And as Churchill said, travel is experience, and I don't think one could ever get better experience than traveling. And also, people are frightened to leave their family and leave their home. I can say that it gave my family, my parents, my brothers a chance to travel the world, because I worked in South Africa, I worked in the United States, I worked in the Far East, and I worked in London before I came home. I would certainly recommend that people consider emigrating. I think there's a lot of skills readily saleable, and we're talking about the bright young people, so I'm assuming they're graduates. So certainly if you've got financial skills, if you're in the banking world or if you're in the accounting world and gone into business in the financial side, there are definitely opportunities out there. If you're in the engineering world, again, there are opportunities out there. I've been recruiting for a general manager in Saudi Arabia for an engineer. I'm recruiting for financial people in the West Indies at the moment. If you're in the medical world or in the medical related world like physiotherapists, radiographers, again, the world outside there is looking for people who have those skills, and I think that it has to be viewed as something that's going to add value to your career before you decide to come back home to Northern Ireland and take over again at a time when the economy's in better shape. I would recommend Australia. I would also recommend Canada. I recommend Australia because the economy there is going along at a tremendous rate. It's sitting at the tail end of China there, so there's this tremendous demand for all sorts of products coming out of Australia, and what used to be a country that depended on tourism has now become a financial centre, it's become a mining centre, it's become a wine growing centre. So there's a completely different country we're looking at from 10 years ago. So I'd certainly look at Australia. I would also look at Canada. Canada didn't suffer in the world recession. Canada's got a lot of minerals, a lot of oil sands. So the country is continuing to grow and continuing to expand, so I'd certainly recommend Canada as well. I'd also recommend the English-speaking countries in Southeast Asia. I've worked in Hong Kong and I've worked in Singapore, and I'd certainly recommend those two as great buzzing cities where there's always a demand for people. Malaysia is another place which is English-speaking. Again, I would recommend it strongly. But in the three economies there that we're talking about, they're growing at about 9 or 10% at the moment, so there isn't enough local people to meet all the demands for skilled labour, and they're wonderful places to live in, and they certainly have most wonderful climate, so I would certainly recommend those three as well. The senior individual, if he's in his late 50s or something like that, it's going to be very difficult for him to get back into a job as a managing director, as an operations director, as a financial director. I think what that individual has to do is to re-look at their CV and really consider what are all the skills they've got. And I think then you break down those skills and sell them in parts. I think you can do it if you've reached the level of managing director, you've probably come through the level of being a sales director. If you've been a sales director, you've probably been able to sell your product in Europe. You've probably sold it around the world, so you can rejig yourself into being a super salesman. And there are some SMEs in the marketplace would love to be able to export. They can't afford a £75,000 and a company car and a pension to give to someone to handle their exports full time. But you could be working for them 5-6 days a month and charging them £25,000. That's the sort of thing I would recommend to the 59-year-old. Look at your CV. What are all the things you have done? How could you package those? How could you sell them? When I come out of from leaving the airport as managing director at the airport, I was recommended to look at a portfolio of consultancies. And what I was able to do was to do 5 or 6 different jobs. I was able to use my legal experience and help some companies with their legal contracts. In another situation, I was able to go into the marketplace and look at the Monopolies Commission. The customer was facing a Monopolies Commission situation. They asked me if I could go into the marketplace and talk to various lawyers in the city and help them out in that area. I was able to go in and help one of the companies here, one of the bigger companies here in Northern Ireland, to get banking in London. They had never gone into the London market before, and I was able to go into the London market and get them facilities. I was able to help the local banks in lending money to the Japanese and lending money to the Korean companies who'd arrived in Belfast, and the local banks were not able to really understand their financials, and I was able to help those. So I took my CV apart and I sold it all in pieces, and that way I earned a really good salary. I've had a gentleman in his late 50s who has been managing director of his own company, and the company has recently got into trouble, and he's had to come out and see what he can do for the rest of his career. And when analysing his CV, I've been able to see that while he was being the managing director, he hadn't been in the sales director role for probably 7 or 8 years. But I noticed in the selling that he had done, he had sold in something like 30 countries around the world. So I've been able to encourage him to look at the small and medium-sized company who needs to export if they're going to survive and if they're going to grow, and be able to sell himself already to 2 different companies, one in the oil industry who wants to sell their products to the oil drilling fraternity around the world. He has a lot of experience in Latin America, he's had a lot of experience in Africa, so he's been able to go into these countries for this company. He's only working for them 5 or 6 days a month, so that means that the SME can afford to have him. He's also gone into another company which is making medical diagnostic equipment. Their marketplace is Japan and America, and he has been able to go into those markets, and now he's making sales for them in those two countries. That's the sort of thing. I want that individual to get up to the stage whereby he's got 4 different companies and he's earning $25,000 from each one of those companies. And I believe he can get there because he's got the skills, he's got the energy, he doesn't really want to manage. He's having a ball selling products and being out there traveling the world again.